Are you feeling sluggish, old, and tired? It could be because your body is dehydrated on a cellular level. Most purified waters are acidic and as a result may be rejected by your body. But it doesn't have to be that way. Real water is different. It is beyond alkalinity. Real water is infused with negative ions for ultra-cellular hydration. You will immediately notice the smooth, clean taste as you start hydrating the minute it hits your mouth. Real water. You will taste and feel this difference.
To Nevada Speaks with Victoria Seaman. I'm so happy to be here this week, and it's so beautiful here in Vegas. And I am sitting here with actually my councilman, my personal councilman, Bob Beers. Good afternoon, Bob.
Good afternoon, and let me add that you are my personal assembly representative as well. I live in your district.
So, shall we talk about issues that we need to talk about with each other right now, or should we just move right into this?
Goodness, yeah. Where do we begin?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you because I get a lot of calls, as you do, and a lot of emails about, it can be about excess garbage in someone's front yard. And I have to say that certain issues that I get calls for, and I really don't know who to contact, especially since I'm a new legislator. You've already been an assemblyman. You're a former senator. Now you're the the councilman of Ward 2, and you've been the councilman. This is your second term, right?
I initially filled the unexpired term of Steve Wolfson's when he was appointed district attorney.
That's right.
It was a little bit less than 2 years, and then I was elected to a full term in 2013. So I've been on the job. It'll be another couple months. It'll be 3 years.
3 years. And I have to say, I hear things from the constituents all the time that you've been a great help to them. You've been a great city councilman. And so
we do what we can do. As you know now, you're going into your fourth week in the legislature. Is that correct? Or fifth?
Yeah, it's about my fourth week going into my fourth week.
Going into the fourth. In Carson City, you argue philosophy and abstract things. And I would win all those arguments every single day, and then the next day, the other side would start right back up, So there's never a sense of closure and completion that I found, even when the gavel went down for the last time on the 120th day. You still carry over these ongoing philosophic discussions for a long time, in fact, forever. Those kinds of abstract philosophic discussions about public policy probably have no end ever and just go on and on and on and on. Even after you leave the body continues to debate them.
That's true.
Service on the city council is much more concrete and much more, task-oriented. So we'll get a call about a problem and get a resolution one way or the other. Not always the way somebody wants.
Correct.
We have a temple that's being built up at Vegas and Rampart or so, Vegas and Durango. And it turns out, are on a piece of land that they acquired from the Bureau of Land Management. And they wanted to put a cell tower up there because it would provide them operating funds with which to build community. And it turns out the BLM had rules against it. And so we had to tell them, well, we've looked into it and the rules say this, this, and this, and this. But check out this little rule right here. And 6 months later, they were able to get those restrictions removed, and they're now under construction.
That's fabulous.
They'll probably be done by the time the session's over. So it's just different. Instead of these abstract philosophic discussions,
kind of what you would say hands-on.
Yeah,
you get
very
things
hands-on.
done right away.
Very hands-on. We got a call about a house here in the downtown neighborhood that had the woman was collecting stray dogs, and there were 40 in her house on Friday or
that's
Thursday.
Just a little unsanitary.
It is, and it's not healthy for the animals, and it's not healthy for the homeowner. And so you get these it's just this never-ending parade of different problems, different kinds of problems, and you try to fix them, and you either can or can't, but there's a resolution to them that was lacking in my legislative service.
And you really prefer this. You like this hands-on.
I love this. This is the funnest job I've ever had. It really is. It is just the funnest job.
So what in the world would make you run for U.S. Senate then?
Well, somebody's got to. I guess it's
right.
It's a sense of duty. I've run statewide before. 5-way primary for governor in 2006. I came in second. Lost to Jim Gibbons, but beat the lieutenant governor. And so I've got some experience and credibility on the statewide arena. And I am convinced Washington is pretty seriously dysfunctional. This quantitative easing we've heard about is really nothing more than the very same kind of counterfeiting by the state that the Confederacy did, and it will come back to haunt us. And I believe strongly that while I hope Washington can be fixed, I know it will not be fixed if we send Harry back for another 6 years. So that's why
I agree with you. And we now have both houses in the state legislature. We have both houses in Washington. And I don't hear a lot of good things coming out, mainly in Washington. I hear deal making, and I know I know deals go on. I know you have to compromise. It can't be one way or the other. But I mean, what is your feeling about what's happening right now in Washington with having the Republicans having both houses?
Well, they've reduced I guess let's do a little vocabulary. The deficit is how much more you spend than you take in every year. So every year there's a different dollar value for the deficit. And for the last 75 or 80 years, we've never taken in more than we've spent in order to pay back some of the debt. So that's the second term you have to define, is the debt. The debt is all the cumulative borrowing that has been required by decisions to spend more than you take in. So it's no different than you and your husband's household. You have income and you spend it.
Correct.
And if you spend more than you take in, then you borrow. It's either on a credit card that you didn't pay
and we
back,
have to pay interest.
And you have to pay interest on it. That's right. And eventually you have to pay it back. This has all been done at the federal level under the name of Maynard Keynes. Maynard Keynes was a World War I economist from Great Britain. And what he said was rather revolutionary at the time. He said, you big old states, you big old governments out there, if you find your economy is getting a little sluggish, looking a little recession-y, it's okay for you to borrow money this year and spend it to stimulate economic activity. And then you turn to page 2, which no one in Washington apparently has ever done, and it says, and then when your economy is stimulated and you're back on track, you pay it back. And that's the piece that Washington has just completely ignored for 80 years
somebody
now.
ought to tell them to flip the page.
So it's clear that Washington has to reduce its spending, and sequester is the way that they've sort of come up with out of a kind of a by default method, which reduces everything by the same percentage. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because the many and varied activities of the federal government are described in the Constitution. And in fact, if you look at the many and varied activities of the federal government today, they do a lot of stuff that's not required by the Constitution.
That's correct.
And then there is a 10th Amendment to the Constitution, and it says if something you want to do isn't already in the Constitution, you can't do it. It's not that it's not a good thing to do, but part of the Founding Fathers' separation of powers, designed to keep absolute power under control, they had personal experience with tyrants and kings. Part of the separation of powers, we're all familiar with the branches of government, legislative, judicial, and executive, and the separation of powers within those three branches. But we seem to be less familiar with the separation of powers that exists between the levels of government: federal government, state government, local governments. And the things that the federal government wants to do that it is not authorized to do aren't necessarily things we don't want done. They just should be done by state governments, not by the federal government. So those are the kinds of concepts I'd like to take back to Washington. I'd like to, frankly, see every bill in Washington start off with a paragraph describing its constitutional authority.
I think that's a great idea. A lot of those bills wouldn't even get heard.
They wouldn't even be introduced.
Wouldn't be introduced and wouldn't get heard. And, I've just been hearing a lot about our own, well, let's just say it this way. I've been hearing a lot about this immigration issue and the executive order. And why do we think that the Republicans, now that they are in power in Washington, they're not really moving to defeat this executive order?
Well, I think the House is, the Senate not so much. The bigger philosophic issue with immigration, many nations, in fact, almost every nation in Latin America has implemented an immigration policy whereby people have to have qualifications to come in. You have to bring capital with you with which to start a business or make an investment. You have to have an education and some skills that can contribute to our economy that we're lacking here. So it's not unusual. In fact, it's actually usual. It's the standard thing for governments to have immigration policies that place requirements on immigrants. And we sort of have that, but we don't have any border security.
Right.
And so, this is, President Obama has offered nothing new in this immigration amnesty that he's done by executive order. This is the third time in 30 years that a president has done amnesty. And we can now look back and see that until you secure the borders, amnesty
is not working.
Doesn't work.
Right.
Which is not to say there's not a role for some sort of amnesty.
We definitely need immigration reform.
You have to secure the border, and then for the people who are already here, I don't think it's either humane nor wise, frankly, to send them back to where they came from as an automatic process. There should be a path that once the border is secure, there should be a path to citizenship, in my opinion, that requires them to learn English.
Right.
That requires them to learn our constitutional methods of government here, separation of powers between branches and between levels. There should be a requirement that you get any criminal activity, you're gone. You do get
right. So they should basically go through the same process as those who come here legally. But the problem is, I think we do need reform for legal immigration. I think far too many people wait too long. They come here legally. And then they look and they watch these people come illegally, and they seem to have more rights than the people that come legally. So I would really like to see reform for legal immigration, that they don't have to wait 15 years or spend thousands of dollars. I would like to see us really reform the whole thing. But you're absolutely right. Until you secure the borders, none of that, it doesn't matter what we do.
I think the other thing I don't hear talked about much in immigration policy is our level of welfare in America. There are 6 or 7 different kinds of welfare. There's separate welfare for food, there's separate welfare for medicine, for housing, for energy, for transportation, for walking around money. And combined together, if you work it, and some people, I'm sorry to say, do.
Yeah, they do.
You end up with a living that's a multiple of minimum wage.
Right.
And when that's the case, you're always going to have a huge deficit of people who are willing to work minimum wage jobs. And that's part of what's driven our immigration problems as well. That's part of what's driven our upside-down spending problem.
Absolutely.
Part of the reason that we spend more than we take in every year is that politicians in Washington love to give stuff away. And that's the most popular vehicle, is that combined multiple levels of social service. Also, I find a hard time finding direct support for several of them within the Constitution. So I would be working toward reducing, as primary cost reduction, reducing those kinds of expenditures, exempting, by the way, Social Security, which there's another debate altogether. I believe that it's like PERS. It's a retirement system into which you pay when you're young so that there's money to give you when you're old. And if the funds are managed well, then there's actually more money than you paid in through investment earnings that help support you when you get old. Instead, Congress raids this piggy bank every single year and zeroes it out. They just steal all the money.
And this has also been a problem, I believe, is that they've given this Social Security money to people who've never paid into it. People that come over to this country and they've never paid into it are automatically given this money to live off of. And I think we have a problem with that because you got too many people, like you said, taken from it and not enough people putting into it.
So that needs some reform. Washington needs,
we need to start all over.
Well, no, Washington needs fiscal restraint. It's real simple.
Absolutely.
They need to run themselves just like they run your household, just like you run your household.
A lot of people are beginning to
see
that.
That's just common sense. That's just common sense.
It is common sense.
So it's that kind of economic common sense that Senator Reid does not have, or at least has not yet displayed in his long career representing us, that I intend to bring to the seat and to bring to Washington.
Now, do you think have you heard him announce that he's actually even running? Because I saw him at he has.
He has announced
Well, I saw him at an event about 7 months ago, the Can Do event, and he looked very fragile.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he did not look like he was in the best of health. I mean, I wish him the best of health, but I was, we're still, 2 years away from the election?
Yeah, a little under 2 years, probably 20 months or so.
Yeah. Well, I definitely am supporting you because I think you've been, you're ready for this. You're absolutely ready for this. And I think you have a lot of support in this state.
Going in, I figured the worst case scenario is that Harry's troops are going to lie about me and make stuff up, and
that's just expected.
And I'll lose, but I'll lose so bad that my Ward 2 voters won't send me back to City Hall in 2017 because it really is the funnest job I've ever had. And then the second
we want you to go to Senate. We definitely don't. We love you as a city councilman, but we'd love to see you defeat Harry Reid.
Second worst thing that can happen is I'll win.
So let's talk about this whole soccer stadium.
Yeah.
I had to go back up to Carson City, but last I saw you was standing out in the pouring rain getting signatures. And then the next thing I knew when I was up in Carson City is you all over the news at almost midnight turning in your signatures. You worked your tush off to get those signatures. Tell us about, for people that don't know.
It's kind of like camping.
You kind of had a tent out there over your car. For those of you who didn't see, I think I have a picture on Facebook. Yeah. But I would love for you to tell us there are a lot of listeners who don't know exactly why you did this.
Well, there's several different ways to approach this story now that it's in the rearview mirror. But the story of cities and government with sports stadiums is one that is a frequent flyer in all states and in all large cities. There's an article today about the Chargers are threatening to leave San Diego and go to Los Angeles if the city taxpayers won't kick in and build them a brand new stadium. So
should we call them the LA Chargers?
Yeah, there's this long history of sports teams and stadiums and cities that's pretty sad and sordid. And today, no economists really argue that there's economic benefit to having such a stadium. Instead, they say it's a civic benefit. It's a pride thing, and the ability to rally around a team and to share that common experience is worth big bucks to taxpayers. It's worth raising your taxes over. I disagree. I think it's cool when it happens, and it's fun, and I still go to the occasional 51s game, but I don't think that it's appropriate for taxpayers to be funding that kind of private activity. So that's kind of what's at the heart of it. In Las Vegas's situation, it's actually a little gnarlier than that. This was an agreement that was set up before the recession with this developer Cordish to build an NBA arena on the site of Old City Hall. And so they signed the contracts back in the day, and we gave Cordish some money as a thank you for signing the contract or something. It was before I got there, so I'm not entirely sure of all those details. But shortly thereafter, Zappos came along and said, oh, wait, we'd like to put our headquarters in their Old City Hall. And so everyone decided that was a good idea, and a deal was cooked up whereby we paid Cordish some more money to take their concept off of the Old City Hall property and put it down on Symphony Park. And that's about the situation when I walked into office in 2011, where Zappos was just about to have their grand opening. In fact, I think I was there for my first city council meeting. Might have been the first meeting in the new city hall. That's kind of where the timing of me coming in was. And so what I got told when I was first elected is, yeah, we've got this deal with these Cordish people for an NBA arena, but the NBA says no, and Cordish doesn't return our calls. And so we got through a period of time where we had promised to not talk with any other developers about any other potential ideas for that land, called an ENA, Exclusive Negotiating Agreement. And we got through that period of time, and Cordish didn't talk to us. Got to the end of that period of time, and suddenly Cordish calls up and says, well, we'd like an extension. Well, have you got anything going? I said, well, we will. Don't ask us any questions. We'd just like an extension. And so City Hall, on a 4-3 vote, I believe, voted to give Cordish an extension. And it was about that time, as that first extension was running out, that the Finley family came along with the idea of the soccer stadium. Now, bear in mind that this has always been conceived as a home for a major sports team, NFL, NBA, maybe even NHL. And so soccer was kind of a new idea. While it is the dominant sport in Latin America and Europe, it's just never really gotten as big here as American football or baseball has been. But it was a sport. And so enough people on the council decided that this is it. This is what's going to fix everything. That they developed some momentum. And ultimately, it was the mayor and 2 council persons against the other 4 council persons, which is kind of a tie, because the mayor doesn't technically get a super vote, but has a bigger voice than the rest of the council members.
Right.
And so we proceeded for 2014 contemplating this deal in a variety of forms, and it going down on a 4-3 vote and being saved at the last second with a contingency, let them come back with a better plan. And so we get to the end of the year, and one of the council members changed their mind, and so it became 4-3 in favor of doing it. And that's kind of where it ended up at Christmas time. At that meeting, I asked for Stavros
But let's
Anthony.
talk about, before we go on
Okay.
about that, now, if such a great idea, private industry, great idea, Finley wants to do this, why didn't they fund it? If it's a moneymaker, it's a great idea.
You explore in business. You explore all your alternatives.
Right.
And
I agree.
MGM explored all their alternatives for a while and decided that the Clark County Commission was not going to give them a big pile of cash, so they built the thing on their own.
Right. Because they believed it was going to make money.
And so I think from the Finley's perspective, it was kind of like, well, we're actually here to play soccer, and do we really have to go through this public funding thing? And Cordish is really in the business of extracting public funding from local governments,
Right.
not so much in the business.
I want the listeners to understand this.
And so, and the city, because of this ENA agreement, was forced to say to the Finley family, who we've all known and appreciated their community support in a variety of activities for many years, we had to say to them, oh, sorry, we can't talk to you. You guys have to go talk to Cordish. And so Cordish, because of this contract that the previous mayor had put us into with Cordish, kind of had us over a barrel and had Finley over a barrel. And so that's how it went down. I don't know if Cordish had just been able to approach it on their own and picked another partner, if they'd be able to do it with significantly less public funding or not. Probably, because we see the MGM actually doing it with private funding just 4 or 5 miles away. So, long story short, we had this petition drive to put it on the ballot. We tried to get it on the ballot through a resolution. The resolution was voted down the first meeting in January. We started.
Don't rush through this. Don't make it a short story. We're going to talk more about this, but we're going to just take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Councilman Bob Beers to talk more about the soccer stadium. Welcome back to Nevada Speaks with Victoria Seaman. I'm here with Councilman Bob Beers, and I want to say quickly thank you to Real Water for sponsoring this show.
I want to say thank you to Real Water as well. I started my day this morning at a 5K fundraising fun run walk at Tule Springs for the Founders Academy Charter School, on whose board I sit. And they were one of the sponsors of our event as well.
Aren't they amazing?
They
are.
Folks
it's a great group, and the owner of that company is now one of our assemblymen.
I did not know that.
Brent Jones.
Oh, okay, all right.
Assemblyman Brent Jones is one of our. He's an incredible legislator, by the way. He's a freshman, but just a great guy.
Nothing wrong with freshmen.
Nothing wrong. Yes,
wrong
yes. You were one before. You've been a freshman before. You were a freshman senator, freshman councilman, and a freshman.
I've been a freshman and a freshman high school student at Clark.
Yeah, absolutely. So nothing wrong
freshman
with
college
them.
Student at UNR. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with them, except for the sophomores and juniors kind of give you a hard time. But other than that, I have to say, Real Water does sponsor a lot of different programs. They are out there. They are charitable, and not to mention how great the water is. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to have some great health benefits too. But enough about Real Water. So I just want to get back to the stadium because, for listeners out there, this may go on the June ballot.
Yeah, it may be a ballot question.
So we got to talk about that. And we got to finish talking about, why it came to this point and how did it get here?
Well, you have to understand the basic deal. And it's not simple. It's not clear. You can ask 10 different people what the basic deal is, and you probably end up with 10 different versions, but they all kind of sound the same. And they go like this. The facility is basically proposed to cost $250 million.
Did you say 250?
Which is about the highest number for an MLS stadium in America. All right?
That's outrageous.
That includes land worth approximately $50 million. Okay. So without the land, it's $200 million. And of that $200 million, it's proposed that the city is going to kick in something around $60 million.
Plus the land.
Plus the land.
So that's $110 million.
Ballpark, $110 million, depending on how you count various things. For example,
and we know that if something's $110 million, it's really going to turn out to be...
And it has the potential to be more than that. But that includes things like giving them mostly free property tax for the life of the project. So how do you value that? Okay, so finance people have techniques. And it's actually about 6 different pieces of funding. But the one that I think most of the opponents found the most offensive was to take money that's earmarked for parks and recreation, which is already, one can argue, not enough to really do a bang-up job, and direct that out of parks and park construction and park maintenance and put it into the stadium. And that's probably the piece that generated the most controversy. you'll hear the proponents of the stadium say, whoa, 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 that's not parks money. That's money we get from tourists. Well, and as is the case in many political things, everybody's right. This particular cash flow item consists of a payment that the city receives from the LVCVA for the work involved in collecting room tax within city limits. Room tax goes to the LVCVA. It's their primary funding source. And so the city steps in because it's our city. After all, we know all these people. We license their businesses, and we collect their room tax proceeds and then give it minus 10% to the LVCVA, Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. So that's kind of like a commission for the work of collecting that tax. And by law, it's directed to go for Parks and Recreation. It's about $6 million a year. So, yes, it's tourist money, sort of. The same way if you are a cocktail server on the Strip, your paycheck after you've cashed it and put it in your purse is tourist money. It's kind of your money now, but it's all right, if you insist. So that was the piece I think that most people had the greatest heartburn with, because I think we all agree that our parks are underfunded. In the past, we've taken that money, for example, 10 years ago, and we borrowed against it. We told the world, we can afford to pay you $6 million a year for the next 10 years. How much money will you give us? And they gave us $45 million we used to build some major, large parks. We would do the same if we could, but if we take half of that and put it into the stadium, then we can only borrow half as much to build half as many parks. Or in the alternative, as a policy matter, we could decide to not borrow and build a big cash pile which we can turn into a big park, but instead use that to enhance our parks. I was out on a project at the Cedar Trail, which is in kind of a little east of downtown, not far from Stewart and Mojave, and there's a group of youngsters from the Education Foundation that were doing a service project, painting a mural on a wall and cleaning the trail up. And on the morning of that ribbon cutting, I walked up the Cedar Trail from the parking area, and all of the doggy pot bags were empty. So we could check that daily instead of weekly. That's correct. And you would not end up with
won't end up stepping in
dog poop. Right. So those are the kinds of policy decisions that we face with money like this, and I think that was the piece that really caused the most animosity and angst over the project. But there were several other pieces as well that didn't make a lot of sense and that were stretching some rules to get there.
And what would happen had we put this money in and build the stadium, and the stadium isn't making money?
Well, as it was originally proposed, we would be tapping into our general fund to make up the operating deficit. But then that actually changed early on, probably by April of 2014. The proposal became, instead of the city's going to own and operate this facility, we're just going to give a smaller amount of cash to the developer, and the developer is going to own and operate the facility, in which case it's just like the monorail, actually. That is what happened with the monorail, and it went through bankruptcy. It was a nonprofit corporation.
Right.
Its revenue was not nearly enough to pay its credit card bill. And
that monorail was not well thought out, and I'm glad that somebody like you took this upon yourself to move forward to really leave this in the hands of the people
and that's decide. Ultimately when it was a 4-3 vote at the city council, and then they killed the resolution to have an advisory question on the ballot. That's when we went for the non-advisory binding question via signatures of voters. They told us on the first day in a letter, I mean, it's a piece of paper, it's posted on my website from the city clerk, that it's 2,306 signatures we need. We have 2.5 weeks to gather it. And then about halfway through, the city attorney came back and said, oh, no, made a mistake. It's 8,258 signatures you need, and you don't have that last half week. So we scrambled and scrambled and scrambled.
But you did it.
But we did it.
You did it.
Turned in 9,000 signatures, and the city tried to say, no, it's Still not good.
Did they give you a new number?
Well, the judge did. The judge said the law is the law, and the number is 2,306.
Oh,
And so Judge Weiss, about 2 weeks ago, I think, issued a ruling that the city had to put us on the ballot. And at the last city council meeting last Wednesday, in fact, the council voted to put us on the ballot. It was a unanimous vote. Interestingly enough, there was another companion agenda item last Wednesday about whether or not to appeal the judge's ruling, because it turns out that the city attorney's briefs didn't say, Your Honor, the issue is whether these numbers are right or wrong. They said, Your Honor, it's a matter of whether these numbers are right or wrong, plus there's a bunch of other stuff. And the judge's ruling said, well, you're wrong on the numbers, city. And oh, by the way, on that all that other stuff, you're wrong too. And that all that other stuff is what they're contemplating appealing to the Supreme Court for. And it would be a shame because we don't have...
But they've already...
put it on the ballot.
Put it on the ballot. So why would you contemplate and wait on voting to appeal this?
We wouldn't contemplate. We wouldn't wait on voting. It's going to be on the ballot. At this point, it's going to be on the ballot.
But I don't understand the other vote.
The other pieces of it are essentially the city saying, but wait, the question itself that everyone signed they want on the ballot,
oh, the question.
The question itself is invalid, therefore it comes off the ballot.
Okay.
And that's kind of where they would be going if they go there. It was interesting, they had a closed-door session to talk about this litigation, but they kicked out me and Stavros Anthony and Lois Tarkanian. So it was just the four people who are in favor of the stadium at this point. And frankly, I think this is all going to come down to the election.
Absolutely.
We have city elections this spring.
I just want to know, who were the other city council members and, of course, Mayor Carolyn Goodman. So it was Ricky Barlow, Bob Coffin, and
Steve Ross.
They voted for the stadium.
Yep.
Okay. And I wonder, I mean, obviously their constituents can't be happy about this since you collected so many signatures in all of Las Vegas. This wasn't just in your council ward, it was in all of the city.
Well, you know, constituents can be unhappy without being pissed off. The question is if they're pissed off enough to make a change in their city council member.
Which leads me to my next question. So Marilyn Goodman has an opponent, City Councilman Mayor Pro Tem Stavros Anthony.
Stavros represents the area kind of west of the 95 between Lake Mead and Ann Road.
Correct.
And that's his neighborhood, and he's been on the city council representing those folks for just under 6 years. Before that, he was a university regent and helped determine the policy direction set for the University of Nevada system. He has got a PhD in sociology and served us as a Metro police officer. I think he retired as a captain, I'm not sure, for like 29 years. So he's got an
incredible resume.
An incredible resume.
And I like his policies.
Well, and certainly on this stadium, he's been rock solid all along. I have to admit, I ended up voting in favor of the motion in October to let them come back. We all thought we were voting on a motion to eliminate public funding in the next plan. It turned out the motion was to work toward eliminating public funding, but it didn't really matter. The final plan was actually hire more public funding than that plan. So as long as you have 4 votes, it doesn't really matter what you said, what you voted the last time. And Stavros was the lone no vote on that. He did not believe that it was prudent to give them yet another chance. He did not believe that they would do what they said, which is come back with less public funding in it.
So now that this is going to be on the ballot, what has happened with Findlay now? Are they still...
We don't know. The question from our perspective, really from the city council's perspective, really is more about what does the city do from this point forward. Symphony Park is a very expensive piece of dirt. It was where Union Pacific Rail Yard was for the first 75 years of Las Vegas. And it had become quite polluted. Initially, it was not so bad. There were a pile of coals and water is basically what ran the railroad. And then at some point in modernization, the diesel engine came along and refueling of trains took place there, and diesel fuel spilled into the ground. They also used benzene to clean the undercarriage of rail cars as they were being transported between Salt Lake and Los Angeles. And that got into the ground and contaminated it. So through a very complex deal, the city essentially took possession of the land and some responsibility for the environmental remediation, fancy word for cleanup. And so the city borrowed a huge amount of money and commenced environmental cleanup. So the city's cost in having that land is huge and borrowed. So we're paying a couple $1 million interest every year now in order to pay off, or just actually not even pay off, but keep that debt at the same level. The plan was we'd sell lots in Symphony Park and use the proceeds to pay off the debt.
And why hasn't that been done?
I don't know.
Because it seems like...
Actually, I have a theory that cities are lousy developers. I think that, one of the episodes with this stadium came when 3 weeks after its contractual due date, the pro forma was forwarded to the city council members by our economic development people on a Sunday afternoon, and I read the first 2/3 of it Sunday night, and then the last third of it on Monday morning, and I didn't look right. It looked to me like the project was essentially spending an amount equal to half of its revenue twice. So instead of $8 million of revenue and $8 million of expenses, it looked to me like it was proposing $8 million of revenue and $12 million of expenses. And so I reached out to Guy Hobbs, who's a consultant now, but former county finance manager and also a Ward 2 resident, who I had actually knocked on his door and introduced myself when I ran for office. And Guy looked at it and said, I think you're right. And it turns out that our professionals on our economic development department didn't realize that until I pointed it out. The developer quickly retracted that incorrect document and substituted another one after running it through a financial blender and pouring it into a new sausage skin, I think. But it's just indicative of why cities, I think, are lousy developers. It's all other people's money. I've known a number of developers over the years, and these people are big-time gamblers, and they invest heavily in land and in improvements and hope they can sell it for more than they paid for it.
Sounds like they're catching on to what the government does, spending other people's money.
Real developers live life with an adrenaline edge, and I don't think city developers do.
Well, let me ask you, this will go on the ballot, and what if it passes? Let's say the people want this soccer stadium. I mean, first of all, we didn't even know Finley's still in this.
We don't know.
Is it possible that it won't go on the ballot?
Yes. If the city appeals and a judge says, okay, they got the numbers, but there's another problem, and take it off the ballot, then it won't be on the ballot. But I think that's less than 50% likely. It seems very likely that it will be on the ballot.
Okay, and so for all our listeners out there, what could potentially happen if this passed? I mean, what are some of the things that could happen? It passes, we build this soccer stadium. What are taxpayers on the hook for? Potentially. Why would this be something?
Taxpayers are on the hook for about $55-60 million in cash-like stuff, and land that's been appraised at $39 to $49 million in worth. That's what taxpayers are on the hook for as far as financially. If the facility turns out to not be able to pay off the lending that it's going to, the borrowing that it's going to do to pay for the other half, and it goes through bankruptcy, there's no telling what it looks like on the other side of bankruptcy. Perhaps
Will the taxpayers be on the hook for that?
No, the taxpayers would not be on the hook for a loss in bankruptcy. The people who lend the money to Cordish or Finley or whoever builds this project, because we're still talking that the private developer is going to have to borrow $140 million from somebody if they can talk someone into doing it.
Right.
And there's
a possibility
there's
that they
a big possibility that they cannot. But if they can, then if they do go through bankruptcy, then those people would be out of luck. Or they might become the new owners of the stadium. That also happens in bankruptcy, where the people who lent the money to the project and can't get paid back because there's not enough money coming through end up owning the underlying asset. That's also a possibility. Worst case scenario, you'll be able to go to a great flea market in the parking lot in the morning and a wonderful symphony at the Smith Center in the afternoon.
I don't know that we want a flea market over near where the symphony is. Well, Bob, I'm speechless after that. So I am grateful that you got the signatures because, quite frankly, I don't like the idea of the city going into business with private industry. I've always believed that if it's something that private industry believes is going to be profitable, they'll find a way to do it without putting the city in any kind of problems, or get with taxpayers being on the hook. So I'm grateful for the work that you did getting the signatures. I'm grateful that you're my city councilman. Is there anything you'd like to say before we close our show today?
I'm grateful that you decided to run for the assembly. This is going to be an interesting session, I think, as we wind down. I know that there was a great deal of angst amongst the activist class about the decisions that were made about leadership. And as I saw it, and I'm not asking you to confirm or deny, it was about 12-12 with one guy playing the swing vote. And I think there was a great deal of talk amongst activists that that's how the tax vote's going to go down on the large tax hike that Governor Sandoval is proposing. But I believe that my own experience in the 2003 legislative session was that the lines will end up being drawn on that proposal much different than they were drawn on leadership. That comes down to more doesn't make sense rather than what committee chairmanships will I get, which is what colors a lot of leadership decision-making within the caucus. And I'm glad that you're representing my neighborhood up there.
Thank you, Councilman. I really appreciate it. So I just want to thank you all for joining us today, and I want to thank Real Water for sponsoring this show. We'll be back again next week for Nevada Speaks with Victoria Seaman.
Hello, my name is Brent Jones, and I'm the president and majority owner of Real Water. Southern Nevada is the headquarters of Real Water, and it's also the place that my family and I call home. During these recent difficult financial times, Real Water has been fortunate enough to grow and provide jobs to numerous Southern Nevada families. I personally take pride in this, as we are doing our part to help bring back prosperity to Southern Nevada. Nevada is not just a place of business, it's our community. That's why Real Water also supports charities that make Southern Nevada better. Charities like the UNLV Foundation, Opportunity Village, Help of Southern Nevada, Hope for Prisoners, and various other worthwhile causes and church groups. So you know that when you purchase Real Water, not only are you buying a premium, locally produced bottled water, you're also helping to build a better community for us all. Thank you for supporting Real Water.
Thank you, Southern